Hello and welcome to the Supernatural Fandom Track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail Z. Martin, and today we are talking about the Season 4 road trip. Where did the boys go in Season 4? Why did the writers pick to have them go there? Which places were real and which were fictional? We're going to talk about all of that, but first, let's have our wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with Carole.
Hi, I'm Carole Stokes. I've been a Supernatural fan since Season 3, started writing fanfic in 2012, and still going strong. Love those boys.
Great. Lynn?
Hi, I'm Dr. Lynn Zubernis. I'm a clinical psychologist and a professor at Winchester University, and I've written lots of books on Supernatural since fan studies is my research area. The last two that I've written have been with the actors of Supernatural and the fans. Family Don't End with Blood, with the boys looking nice on the cover, and There'll Be Peace When You Are Done, which is focusing on the end of the show and the legacy that it leaves behind.
Okay, Elektra.
I'm Elektra Hammond. I'm a writer and a copy editor, and I've been watching the show since the pilot aired.
Susan.
Hey, I am Susan Griffith. I write with my husband Clay Griffith. We are authors who have penned the Vampire Empire series, the Crowning Key series, numerous comic books, numerous short stories, but I've also been a fan of Supernatural since the beginning, and I just can't stop thinking about the stories, can't stop thinking about the boys, as usual.
Can't stop, won't stop. I'm Gail Z. Martin, and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic and urban fantasy. As Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance, but all my modern worlds are ones Sam and Dean could walk into and feel right at home. I got into the show in the middle of season 11, binge watched 11 seasons in 4 months so I could start live tweeting season 12, and fell down the rabbit hole and haven't hit bottom. Hope I never do. So let's talk about season 4. Now, if you look up the locations for season 4 in the Supernatural Wiki, I have to laugh because the first one for season 4 starts with hell. Not Hell, Michigan, just hell. Okay. But before we get into specifics like that, what are some of the locations other than hell that really stuck in your mind that we visited, real or imaginary, in season 4? Lynn?
I mean, I'm not going to be good at this because I haven't done one of these before, so I totally wasn't thinking about locations. So I just was looking over the episodes, and I don't know where most of them took place, but I do know that In the Beginning took place in Lawrence, Kansas, so I can talk about that.
Yep.
I thought that was, of course, Lawrence, Kansas is arguably the most iconic location for Supernatural anyway, but that one is particularly interesting because it's also back in the 1970s. So not only do we get to see a little more of the place where Sam and Dean came from, but we also get to see what it was like back in the 1970s. So I don't know, with the Winchesters coming up soon, that one is a particularly interesting one to think about because that's going to take place also in the 70s, a little bit before that episode. So I like that we got to see it. And I think it, especially in that flashback in the 1970s, it really comes through as sort of, small town America. You see a lot of things in it that just really evoke that feel, even though obviously it was filmed in Vancouver, but they did a really good job of making it look like small town America. And that, the show is so quintessentially American that I love episodes like that really give you a flavor for the place, and in that case, the time where it took place. So that one I know. Thanks for starting with me because that might be the only one that I know the location that it takes place in.
Oh, I bet you'll know more, but you're right. The show is so quintessentially Americana with the highways and the landscape and the small towns and the diners that all those little towns, if you have any personal experience with the little towns that aren't the famous places, it definitely strikes a chord. Elektra, what were some of the locations that stood out?
Kripke's Hollow, the non-existent town of Kripke's Hollow, where Chuck Shirley has been hiding and writing the Gospel of the Winchesters. That is just too cool, and that they named it after Mr. Kripke.
Well, and I also think that they named it after the Gilmore Girls. It was kind of like a link between Sam, because there was a something hollow in Gilmore.
Hollow.
Yes. So it was sort of like an amalgamation of both of Kripke's show and Sam's, since he was also on Gilmore Girls.
Okay. Any others for you, Susan?
I think the one that stuck out for me was the Bedford, Iowa, just because Bedford has been in a lot of movies as being the most wholesome of all towns, of being like the best of Americana, the best people, and to see, you know, that come up in the show and you know, with I think it was the one with the siren, if I remember correctly,
yeah,
where, you know, the two brothers are going at each other, and it's just this whole thing that's so not anything like Bedford, Iowa in any shape, way, or form.
The quintessential Hallmark town.
Right.
I think the one that jumps out to me is Monster Movie being theoretically set in Canonsburg, Pennsylvania. I lived in Pittsburgh for 10 years. I'm from that corner of Pennsylvania, and nothing interesting ever happens in Canonsburg. Trust me on this. So it was one of those where it came up, I kind of squealed and said, wait, Canonsburg? I've been there. Just because it was, I'm not even sure they have an Oktoberfest in Canonsburg. So that was one of those, okay, I love that. The other thing I notice is that Carthage, Missouri shows up. Now, Carthage shows up again in season 5 in a very dark way, because that's Abandon Hope, the showdown with Lucifer. And that location was picked because of a really horrific Civil War battle, I think, that had a huge death toll, which factored into it being used in the Lucifer episode. So I was interested to see it being used in Metamorphosis as well, because they do revisit even the fictional locations pretty often.
I was going to say, Gail, the other one that I did remember the location more or less of was Monster Movie, because I'm also in Pennsylvania, and that one really reminded me of there's an amusement park called Hershey Park, which is near me in Pennsylvania, and just the way that we saw that, you know, the whole like fictionalized, the big pretzels and the cheesy outfits, and, you know, the Oktoberfest that's not really that much like the real Oktoberfest. All of that just reminded me of like the cheesiness. And I love Hershey Park. I'm not dissing it in any way, shape, or form, but it's incredibly cheesy. So that episode just reminded me so much of like all these family trips to Hershey Park and picturing Sam and Dean there.
Oh, I agree. My dad's family was from the Reading area over on the eastern side of Pennsylvania. So I've been to the Oktoberfests in like the Kutztown area. And you're right. There's absolutely nothing authentic or ethnic about it except pretzels and beer and some Oompa Pop bands. But it's a thing of its own. Oktoberfest is about as accurate as tiki bars. You know, they're a thing unto themselves that bear no resemblance to the culture from which they theoretically sprang. And you just go, huh?
But they're fun.
But they're fun, and the drinks are good. So yes, absolutely, I totally get it. Now, before we go for round 2 on other places,
I didn't get round 1.
Oh, I'm sorry. You didn't get round 1. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm gonna pick Jump the Shark, because they're in that area a lot, that Minnesota, Wisconsin kind of area. But in this case, they actually had a little homage to Kim Manners on this, where Kelsey Manor was Kim Manners, and the room of the Kelsey Manor, which was the motel they were in, had a lot of little touches, like his initials were on a paddle hung on the wall and things like that. So they had a bunch of little tidbits of paying respect to Kim Manners. And I just love that this kind of show has the flexibility to do that. And so many viewers wouldn't even, frankly, I wouldn't even have caught that. I found this out researching it, but knowing that, I want to go back and watch it and be like, oh yeah, there it is, because they're so respectful to their own history, of not just the show's history, but the making of the show's history. And I just really liked that.
No, I think that's a great point, because they do it so much throughout the show, where there are the beer is named for somebody, the diner is named for somebody, the gas station. There, if you know what to look for, there are these wonderful little Easter eggs and tidbits all throughout the show. And I'm pleased that we've seen some of that continue in Walker. They were just in a coffee shop in a previous episode that was called Easy Tiger. And it was like, I know it's there. I know where that came from. And
when they had the episode with first of all, with the green cooler, but then they pulled out one of the classic Supernatural beer brands that they used to use. So yeah, it's nice.
I was at a bar where they actually had the brand that the Margie Kugel beers were based on, because Margie Kugel was a joke named for one of the prop people, but there's a something Kugel beer that looks like it. And I had to take pictures and post them going, look, the original for Margie Kugel. All right, so here's a stumper question. I don't know the answer, so I'm really hoping somebody else does. What's with Pontiac, Illinois? That's where Sam buried Dean's body after the Hellhound. But Dean died in New Haven, Connecticut. So why did Sam drive from Connecticut to Illinois with Dean's body in the back of the Impala to bury him in a random grassy lot? What was so, and then it shows up in The Rapture, it shows up in several other episodes, and it's like, okay, what's the secret connection here to Pontiac, Illinois? The Impala isn't even a Pontiac.
There's Jimmy Novak lives there, and he's a religious man. Maybe before you've got, oh God, brother, what's his name, telling people that they should beg to be possessed by angels. Maybe there weren't that many people who honestly wanted it and asked for it.
Well, oddly, and I don't think this has anything to do with it at all, but I do know that it's the home of the Route 66 Association of Illinois Hall of Fame and Museum. Maybe it's like a homage, but that has nothing to do with the series and canon. But it seemed odd that that's maybe that's why they're throwing it in.
Maybe Sam wanted to go to the museum and figured, hey, twofer. He could bury his brother and go to the museum.
Dean would have loved to go to the museum. He was just going to take it with him. Yeah.
Maybe Kripke with his, this is like a Route 66 story. Maybe that was Kripke's little homage, putting that in there for himself. This is a road trip story, so Route 66.
Well,
it's
I know
anything in there though.
Yeah, it does show up a lot, but I mean, that's one of the fun things about being a writer or creating things is you can throw stuff in there for your own amusement. It doesn't have to amuse anybody else. You put it in there and it makes you laugh every time you see it. I don't know. I don't have a definitive answer to that, so your guess is as good as mine.
Well, they never talk about it. I don't think we're ever going to know unless they decide to give us some sort of rationalization. But I don't think it has anything to do with canon. Otherwise, they would have played with it, or somebody would have discovered it by now. Or has there ever been any fan fiction? I've never read any fan fiction that had anything about why that may have been.
That's it. If I ever get to ask Kripke a question at a convention, I'm going to say, why Pontiac, Illinois?
Maybe they'll say something in the podcast.
Yeah, I was thinking that when they get to that episode, you could send that to the podcast and say, somebody find out why this takes place in Pontiac.
Yeah, I think it's a legit question because we get answers on a lot of other things.
Yeah.
It's possible they realized that they just didn't want everything centered so far in one direction or another. So they moved the body, and they didn't realize that this thing was going to go on so long and people would become quite so rabid about it. You know, these things happen with TV shows all the time. And, you know, no one really notices that the body moved over the course of, you know, the season finale and the season opener. It happens.
True.
And then you go 15 years and have a wiki and folks like us, and now we're asking uncomfortable questions.
At the end of season 3, I don't think they were thinking it would go 15 years.
No.
Oh no, they were not. They were wondering if they were going to eke out another season. Maybe.
Yeah.
So round 2 with locations, real and imagined. Elektra?
Well, Sioux Falls,
Mm-hmm.
not too terribly far from Pontiac, Illinois. At least, you know, it would have been way further from Connecticut. So convenient to get to Bobby. South Dakota is a long way from Connecticut.
That's true.
And, you know, there are a number of episodes set in and around Bobby this season.
A lot. Yeah.
And you cannot have too much Bobby as far as I'm concerned.
No. Every time I see a real news item that pops up, which it does occasionally, that's set in Sioux Falls, part of me just wants to go, I know people there. Oh, they're not real. I really don't. But I feel like I know people there.
But we so know people there. If they're not real, it's okay. We love them anyway.
This is true. Susan, how about you?
I'm thinking, why in the It's a Terrible Life did they never place anybody? I think that's like the one unknown place in the entire series. Now, granted, it was all made up, but you'd think in order to anchor them, they would kind of know where they were supposed to be. So why didn't they give them a location? They could have picked anything. They could have picked Pontiac, Illinois, for God's sakes, or Bedford, Iowa, or any of them, and they chose to keep that one kind of ambiguous, when that's the one where they're living their fantasy life in the corporation, and they don't have any knowledge of who or what they used to do. Now, granted, they probably didn't want to give them a clue as to what they were doing because they wanted them kind of figure it out by themselves, but it's odd that they wouldn't know what town. And maybe they did, but maybe I guess us as the viewers weren't really given that information. So it was kind of interesting to me. And I think the other one was the location of hell is where it all was. It just seemed like an odd place that it was going to be. I think it was in California, wasn't it? In
and nice.
Yeah, you know, and not that it's. You know, I guess they could have picked any place, but why there? Why in that particular location in California was the door to hell? And that was always kind of something curious to me. I did read all this research, and I couldn't find any clue as to why they decided, let's just pick that. As sometimes you think it's arbitrary, but.
Well, and there are plenty of places in the U.S. that are rumored to have hell gates. Even York, Pennsylvania has 7 of them.
That's true.
I've been to York, and if they had 7 hell gates, it would have been a lot more exciting than it was. But, you know, Brazil, Indiana has a hell gate. But Van Nuys, huh?
I didn't see it.
Yeah.
In the Buffyverse, it was Cleveland.
I was going to say, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I agree. And the beautiful room was actually a shipping crate in a warehouse in Van Nuys, which has got to be, I always wondered, is that an in joke if you were in the LA crowd that, you know, Van Nuys, every place has the other place adjacent that everybody makes jokes about. You know, in Charlotte, it's Gastonia. And, you know, there's always some place. Do people in LA make snarky comments about Van Nuys? I don't know.
Maybe.
Wasn't anything that turned up in my research.
No. So you wonder
if somebody out there lives around in LA, let us know. Email or contact Continual and let us know why Van Nuys.
Comment on the YouTube or in Continual and let us know what the deal is in Van Nuys. Well, and I wondered if some of these places that were a little concrete Washington, which was where wishful thinking supposedly happened, are they nods to somebody on the cast's hometown? Was it an in-joke for the production crew or the writers? That unfortunately named location appears to be real compared to a number of the others that are fictional. Concrete Washington. Where are you from? Concrete.
Maybe they had a map and a dart and a set of darts somewhere. Well, we need a random small town. Let's just talk.
I totally buy that theory.
Well, and Susan, the I Know What You Did Last Summer episode is also in an unknown location. So yeah, that one they didn't even bother with a dartboard.
Did you pick a town? No. Oh crap, I didn't either. Oh well, it doesn't matter.
We just won't mention it.
Yeah.
So some of the pardon?
No, I was just gonna say it happened because we were writing for the Flash TV show and they couldn't give us any information on the town that the Flash came or lived in. All they knew was a river would run through it. I was like, well, where is the river running through into what? No, we don't know. We actually had to go to the map that was on the Barry's dartboard to zoom in. We took a screen clip in typing it because they absolutely had no idea. They were just randomly pick something and talk about things. So it's not implausible that supernatural people were just going, let's just pick there.
Do we know where After School Special was? Was there a town attached to that one?
Fairfax,
Indiana.
Okay, because I thought that's another episode that has a real feel of place because they go back to that high school, and I felt like it gave such a good understanding of what young Sam and Dean's life was like living like such vagabonds, constantly having to be the new kid. And it seemed like every school everywhere, the kids doing all the normal things that kids do. And the normalness of it and the everydayness of it just made Sam and Dean stand out so much in very different ways. And I thought it was a great episode to show the differences between Sam and Dean. Sam getting picked on for being a freak and being the little one at the time, but nevertheless sort of making friends and really wanting to fit in, and Dean feeling all the bravado on the outside of I'm the popular new kid and everybody wants to date me, but really not fitting in and people sort of making fun of him almost. That scene is so hard to watch when they have young Dean going I'm a hero. I don't like that. I'm not sure if he would have done that. It seems a little out of character to me, but that's horribly humiliating. So I thought that was a great episode, but the feeling of place that it's in, I think it really anchors it to everywhere USA, where Sam and Dean just came in and out of all the time.
I feel like it also really infused a whole vein of fanfic where up until that point, whatever people thought of their hunting life as, pre-adulthood was whatever, but that really crystallized a lot of how people could visualize their experience in terms of being the new kid, not wearing the right clothes. Dean doesn't give a crap about studying, whereas Sam's really into it. And I think from that point on, stories had a real basis to build upon, having had a chance to see that.
Yeah, it was an important episode. That was one of the first Winchester's canon. It was actually, now we had something to base everything on. Yeah.
But you look at something like that and you think, how did they manage to learn how to read? much less Sam got into Sanford. It boggles the mind that they actually got any sort of education at all, much less that they could hit the books and do the research. Because, yeah, they got a month of school here and a month there, and Dean got a few months when he was, you know, basically in reform school. But, you know, I wish they'd shown some scenes of their dad, you know, assigning them some stuff to work on while he was away when he sent them to sit somewhere, or making some effort for them to study, that he cared about them getting an education. I really wish that John Winchester's A+ parenting had included giving a crap that his kids learned how to read and do math.
And which would have been helpful as a hunter, just to be able to read and do, you know, basic math, and not to mention arcane ancient dead languages.
I was gonna say Latin.
Yeah, I always assumed they were getting homeschooled for that very reason, because that's a survival thing to being able to be a hunter. So to me, even though they didn't really state it, that to me was like, yeah, they're going to catch glimpses in schools, but mainly they seemed to be like the majority of it was going to be homeschooled. Though sometimes I wonder about John.
I mean, weights and measures, too much eye of Newton, not enough toe of frog. I mean, it throws the whole thing off.
And a part of that really is a statement as to Sam's drive, that it was Sam who set out for himself to do this. He was thirsty to learn. I don't get the feeling that John, other than things like math is in terms of, you know, calculating your trajectory and, you know, Latin and stuff, gave two poops about traditional schooling. But Sam was the one who then strove after it and, you know, had the mind, had the drive, and despite the moving around, sought out whatever he could, and whatever he wasn't getting, went after on his own.
I mean, they both turned out to be very literate, and they're both well read. They're both smart. I mean, I tended to look at, it's interesting because we all have had to fill in the blanks, right? Because there's a lot of blanks there. So everybody's headcanon is different. It's interesting to me to hear Susan say, well, I always just assumed that John Winchester was homeschooling them. And I was like, huh? John Winchester homeschooling them? What? No, that's not my headcanon at all. I just thought they went from school to school and he pretty much transferred them. They might have missed a day here and a day there, but he more or less kept them in there. But we don't have any idea. Either of those could be the right thing. I don't know.
It just didn't seem to be a priority for him. And they needed something to be able to, if nothing else, get like part-time jobs when they didn't want to hustle pool to make money and steal credit cards. It's nice to be able to do the math so that you can, you know, tend bar.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I mean, I guess my headcanon is that there was always a library. And Sam would go to the library and with those puppy dog eyes would, you know, charm the old lady with the twin set who was sitting behind the desk into getting him any book he wanted. And that for as much as Dean schooled Sam, I think Sam schooled Dean in different things. And I've known so many people who didn't finish a formal education, but because they were so driven, whether it was watching documentaries on TV or getting books from the library or whatever it was, they educated themselves very, very well, better than some people that I know who got a degree because they wanted it and they paid attention. And that's my headcanon on what the boys did.
Too, don't forget Bobby,
mm-hmm.
who may have done the equivalent of homeschooling them when they were with him.
And Pastor Jim, probably
mm-hmm.
same thing.
I think it's all the above at this point.
Yeah, like a patchwork.
Everybody had a hand.
We can all guess at that, but yeah, probably not John. He abandoned them with a box of cereal and a container of milk and went off hunting.
I think he did the basics, but I don't think he was going to be doing anything more than what was needed to survive, and everything else either had to be not homeschooled, through the school itself or through, like Gail was saying, through self-teaching and the two boys kind of teaming up and kind of taking care of themselves as they've always done.
I think the other thing to factor in is whether or not John would have been in any headspace to school anyone, because it can be very frustrating if you are an educator by calling and love this. There's still some kids who get on your nerves, and there are bad days. And I've heard people's stories about having a parent who didn't have a gift for teaching and didn't have any patience and had real world stuff going on, not making the learning process very nice. So I can kind of imagine John on a bad day not being real patient with, a kid who just isn't getting it.
Just ask people how they learn to drive, as an example. Because that's often something that you learn from your folks.
Yeah, I can picture John teaching Dean to drive the Impala. I bet there were some choice words going on there. John was not one to mince words.
No. Well, I want to go back to what Lynn said about how After School Special just managed to conjure up everybody's high school experience in a small town. And Supernatural's ability to get small town America right, I think, is a tribute to, I've always wondered what the backgrounds were of their writers, because to know those details so well for the writers and the prop people, these couldn't have been people who grew up in Beverly Hills or, a big city. Someone had to have had real world experience with these places to get the houses and the diners and the details right. And I've always been curious about who brought that to the table, and how they got it so right.
I mean, for sure, Kripke, we're still in season 4 tonight. We're talking about the first 5 seasons, even though, of course, there were other writers. Kripke had such a hand in everything and crafting everything. And I think that is so much Kripke. That is what he was trying to do. And he did know what small town America was like, and he did want that to be. So I think part of that was him shepherding the writers. I don't know where I know Robbie Thompson is not an LA person. I don't think Sarah Gamble was either, but I don't really know about the other writers at all.
Well, I mean, people do leave small towns and go on to do other things. There was a guy who was a couple of years ahead of me in high school who's a director out in LA now, and Sharon Stone graduated 4 years ahead of me. I didn't know her, but she was there. So people come from somewhere.
Lots of people come from small towns.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they may not, it's where they start. They may not be where they end up or where they're doing their career now. But I've come from a very small town, and I'm living in a capital city now, and that wouldn't have been, anything that I would have even imagined. But I have that small town, childhood. So, I mean, people like Ben Edlund, who just started this was his big season. And he is the comedy writer. He wrote The Tick. He wrote actually, he created the stuff that I grew up and started writing. Clay actually took over the Tick stuff from him. And to see him lend his comedic genius to this was brilliant. And a lot of that came from his upbringing. A lot of that came from, what he did in, Silver Lake high school and stuff like that. So I think there's a lot of that kind of being, that kind of childhood stuff, maybe not where they're living now or what they're doing now, but certainly back in their past somewhere, that they're all bringing that to the table.
And I don't know where like people like Jerry Wanick came from either, but certainly Jerry Wanick's ability to evoke this, small town Americana, on the road motel sort of feeling, that is, it's not just the writing, it's also the set deck and the locations that are so brilliantly done. So I don't know where he got his love of that aesthetic. He clearly loves that aesthetic and is so good at it, but that also added to a lot. And maybe that was his past experience also. I don't know.
What about, is anyone familiar with Minnesota? We had 4 different episodes in Minnesota. Anybody
Been there once?
I haven't either, but somebody decided to put some stuff up there. Of course, it probably does look a lot like Vancouver, you know, especially in the winter.
I've been there. It's very cold. I was grateful for the hamster tunnels that you can walk through to get from building to building without going outside, but they've never incorporated that into Supernatural. So
I think I judged New Year's New Year time of year cat show at a fairgrounds there. And it's bloody cold that time of year when you go to uninsulated cement floors. I don't think I ever took my coat off, and by the time the day was over, I could not feel my feet.
Ugh.
So yeah, you know, cold.
You mentioned those hamster tunnels, which a lot of northern cities have below ground, just because who wants to shovel the 4 feet of snow? And they're creepy as heck, especially when, you know, you're off normal times and you're the only one down there and everything echoes and the lighting.
Theirs are up in the air. Theirs are like raised up. They're tunnels that are raised up,
that's cool.
but they're still creepy.
You've got a habit trail then.
Yeah, exactly.
Rochester, New York had tunnels underneath the ground. So does Burlington, Vermont, and some other places. And yeah, they're just creepy as all hell.
So does Moscow, by the way.
There you go. But I'm just amazed we haven't seen more things set in those tunnels, because they're just creepy.
They're scary as hell.
They are. One place we haven't mentioned is Ilchester, Maryland, where, of course, the big thing goes down at the end in the convent.
Where there's a very large convent.
Mm-hmm.
Where you do not want to hang out.
Yeah. I don't know whether they built or borrowed that church, but like the convent, but like the one in the end of season 8, so perfect for the location. If they did create it, it was a masterpiece. If somebody found it, they were a genius. Anybody know anything to add about Ilchester, Maryland, or the environs?
It does seem like just a particularly fortuitous name. If I was looking at a map and I saw the name Ilchester, I would have made a note of that to use it for something.
Mm-hmm.
It's just one of those, yeah, we should use that.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with the Chester as the second part. I mean,
yeah.
Winchester, Ilchester, I don't know, just seems to make sense.
Well, there are Chesters all over this general part in Pennsylvania and Delaware and Maryland. There's just a lot of those.
Yeah. But I don't know. I mean, does anyone know if there really is even a convent there? I have no idea.
No, that would be a great field trip. Let me make a note. I'm not that far.
Add it to DC Con this year.
That's right.
Field trip to Ilchester.
Well, going to Balticon in a couple of weeks.
There you go. Oh, it would be right there, because that's like right there, right?
What about Union
trips?
What about what?
Union, Kentucky. Anybody have any thoughts on that? That was one of the ones we haven't mentioned yet.
Which episode was that?
Heaven and Hell.
Oh.
So we find Anna and Anna Ruby balancing.
Well, now, interestingly enough, there is a legend about Hell House College of St. Mary's in Ilchester, Maryland.
Ah.
And it is the nickname given to St. Mary's College in, I'm reading this from Wikipedia, so it must be true. The nickname given to St. Mary's College in Ilchester, Maryland, also called Kripke College, originally set up as a Roman Catholic seminary during the 19th century, closed a century later, gained its nickname as a result of numerous legends and rumors surrounding the institution, including stories of satanic worship and ghosts.
Oh, so they knew what they were
chosen.
doing when they picked that place.
Yeah.
Nice.
I love when
worth a
you
stop.
find those connections. That just grounds it in so much more history and makes it so much more real. So yes, Ilchester really did have some problems at the local convent. Well, folks, is there anything that we haven't picked up on yet that you want to mention about either the locations or even as they're road tripping, the diners and motel rooms?
I was struck with family remains in Stratton, Nebraska. And it's where the family is relocating because they're trying to like start over and, you know, start afresh, but there's the creepy girl in the walls and stuff. And it's very, and they're out there because they're on a farm. But when I looked it up, they have a population in that town of 300. 300. My son's graduating class in high school was bigger than that. And I just liked the idea that here they were, you know, I mean, Nebraska is your whole rolling plains, you know, fields of grasses and stuff. That here they were in this really tiny, and they were clearly a big city family. I don't remember what big city they came from, but it was clearly they were metropolitan people because they didn't know what the heck they were doing. And all of a sudden in this like teeny tiny postage stamp sized town. And I just thought that was a really interesting choice for them to pick and to just contemplate. I'm like, 300 people. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Another one for me was the Gray Bull, Wyoming from Death Takes a Holiday.
Yep.
Because that's taken from a number of things, but one of them is also the albino buffalo, the gray, you know, the gray buffalo, which has a huge significant prophecy and spiritual thing for the Native Americans. And it's kind of interesting that they chose that place to choose the point where, you know, all the reapers are being wiped out and held. So I thought that was interesting. I'm not sure if they chose that specifically for that, but because I was like, oh, Gray Bull, that's an odd location. So I did a little research on that, and basically there's a couple of things that they'll name it up. One is the river and stuff like that, but the Gray Bull River is there too. But it also supposed to, because that's taken its name from the albino buffalo, which I thought was curious how they went through that.
Well, Union, Kentucky, as it turns out, does have a number of hauntings, including, now I can't imagine Dean letting this one go without some comments, Big Bone Lick Park, which has disembodied whispers, eerie figures, strange noises, and an evil spirit who lingers in the woods. Narrows Road, which has a phantom police officer in a 1950s car that pulls people over and then vanishes. And all kinds, and a phantom crematorium in nearby Hebron, Kentucky, where you can always smell something burning even if there isn't anyone there.
Oh my God.
So,
that's creepy.
That is
not popcorn in the microwave.
Oh no, that's really creepy. I was gonna say, I don't know what the town is again, of course, because I fail at the point of this, but yellow fever, I thought, also takes place in an interesting place. You know, lots of times their small town Americana feel is more or less a positive thing, but in Yellow Fever, the whole idea of it, especially the flashback at the, you know, the factory town and all the prejudice and the stigma, and, you know, Luther, who was a freak and, you know, killed essentially for being different. That was sort of the dark side of like the factory town. So much of that took place in that abandoned, really creepy factory. So I like that provided, you know, another side, because of course small town America was never this idyllic kind of place. It absolutely had these dark sides. So I like that episode brought that out.
Yeah, which is why so many people who grew up in small towns left them, because they weren't Stars Hollow. Which kind of, again, comes back, you made such a great point with the after school special school ambiance, Lynn, in that in those small towns, these kids who are in high school have known, it's probably the only high school in the town. There was probably only one middle school or junior high. there might have been a couple of elementary schools, but basically these kids have known each other since they got out of diapers. And so to be the new kid in that class of 250 or 300 people, maybe, and that's if they pull from the surrounding area, you're really going to stand out. Unlike, you know, you're the new kid in a big city high school that has 3,000 kids and it's one of 25 high schools. Because those other kids know each other inside and out, for better or worse. So yeah,
it gives you a real understanding of how Sam and Dean came up with their very different but both very effective coping strategies for having to meet and converse with new people all the time. You know, Sam's uncanny ability he's so empathic, he can pick up on other people, he knows what to say, he has the puppy eyes, whatever. And then Dean sort of, especially in early seasons, his persona and his bravado that he doesn't let down and he keeps as a protective device. Both of them, you know, that makes sense that's why they develop those and why they use them for so long. Takes Dean till the end of the series to completely take down that bravado and get real.
Well, and how much they needed to have each other's backs, even if, you know, just one of them being strong in whatever the other one wasn't at the time and backing each other up. You can really see if you were that much of a fish out of water, you'd need your wingman.
Mm-hmm. And it was interesting that Sam knew everybody at that school, even if they were only there for a limited time. For Dean being Mr. Popular, it was Sam who noticed people and took note of people enough to have recalled them, which I don't even know if I could do that on half of my schools that I went to. I don't know if I could recall people generally or recognize names, but Sam, as you know, as we would have expected, would recognize and remember everybody in that school. And of course we got to see Dean in shorts, which that's all I need to say.
Memorable right there, right on its own.
Right there.
Thank you, Jensen Ackles, for picking out that outfit for yourself.
All right, folks, as usual, we've blown through our time. Thank you so much. This has just been wonderful. Before we wrap up, let's have everybody go around and tell us where we can find you online, starting with Susan.
Sure. You can find us at our blog at clayandsusangriffith.com. You can find us on Facebook at Clay and Susan. We're also individual. Clay has his. I'm Susan Z. Griffith, and I think he is just Clay and Susan or Clay Griffith. And that will pretty much, I know Clay's on Twitter a lot more than I am. I'm not on Twitter as much, but Clay's is constantly on Twitter. Much to his, he doesn't get the attention that he wants, so please give him the attention that he needs on Twitter.
Awesome. Elektra.
You can find everything you need at untilmidnight.com. Look for me at Balticon coming up next month and the upcoming anthology Permutations, Well World Stories.
Very nice. Lynn.
You can find me on all social media at FangasmSPN. My own website is fangasmthebook.com, and you can find the books written with the Supernatural cast at peacewhenyouaredone.com.
Nice. Carole.
I'm on Facebook as Carole M. Stokes, where I have Facebook. I'm in Gail's TFWNC group, and of course on Continual. On Twitter, I am true_firesign10, and all of my fic is on AO3 under firesign10. Mind the tags.
And I'm pretty easy to find. The websites are gailzmartin.com, morganbryce.com. All the social media is a variation of those names, so spell it right and you'll find me on most of the major platforms. I run the Supernatural TFWNC group here on Facebook, but most of the time, and I'm a staff writer for the Winchester Family Business, but most of the time you can find me here on Continual. So thank you so much to all of you wonderful panelists for being with us. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There'll be more Supernatural coming up soon on Continual, so we'll see you online.